Welcome, everyone. My name is Ashley Steinbrecher, and I am a researcher with the Delaware Network for Excellence in Autism, or the DNEA. The DNEA is housed at the University of Delaware Center for Disability Studies and offers training, technical assistance, and information dissemination to community agencies, organizations, and those directly impacted by autism spectrum disorder needs across the lifespan. A resource guide that supplements today's topic, along with other related resources, have been compiled onto a Padlet to share with you today. A Padlet is a virtual board used to organize multiple resources in one place. The link to access this Padlet will be dropped in the chat, and the PowerPoint slides from today's session will also be added to the Padlet in the near future. Today's resource guide and other topic-specific resources are free to download on the DNEA webpage. It is now my great pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, Jonathan Martinis, who is an attorney and the Senior Director for Law and Policy for the Burton Blatt Institute at Syracuse University. Jonathan Martinis has over 20 years of experience representing and advocating for people with disabilities. In 2013, Jonathan represented Jenny Hatch in the nationally acclaimed Justice for Jenny case. Jenny's case was the first trial to hold that a person with disabilities has the right to engage in supported decision-making rather than being subject to an unnecessary permanent and full guardianship. Jonathan Martinis continuously dedicates his career to ensuring individuals with disabilities have access to the services and supports needed to live fully and autonomously. Through his numerous publications and presentations, Jonathan has trained thousands of individuals, families, supporters, and professionals about the fundamental right to make choices in life. Today's session will be part one of a three-part virtual speaking series on supported decision-making. All sessions in this series will be recorded, captioned, and posted to the DNEA webpage for future viewing. We will place an evaluation link into the chat at the end of the session, and we will also send you this link in a post-session follow-up email. Jonathan plans to incorporate enough time into this presentation for some questions, so please feel free to add any questions to the Q&A, and we will pose them to him throughout the presentation. And now we are very happy to welcome Jonathan today to present Supported Decision-Making from Justice for Jenny to Justice for All.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And thank you everyone for joining me. I am so excited to talk to you today about what is my favorite subject, what I think is the greatest advance in human and civil rights for people with disabilities since the Americans with Disabilities Act. What we're going to be talking about today and in the two webinars to follow is supported decision-making, ways that we can use supported decision-making to make people's lives better. Now, if you've heard about supported decision-making, you've probably heard about it as an alternative to guardianship, something you can use instead of guardianship or something you can use to emerge from a guardianship. And that's true, and we are going to talk about that today. But before we begin, I always make two promises. Even though you are going to hear me say today that supported decision-making is and should be an alternative to guardianship, you are never going to hear me say, now or ever, that there should never be guardianships. That is not my point in being here today. I'm not here to tell you if you are a guardian, you did wrong. If you considered guardianship, you're wrong or you're evil. That is not my point. My point and our point is to give you information that you can consider should you ever have to make that decision. And in our subsequent webinars, information that can show you how to use supported decision-making in the supports and services people with disabilities use every day. So with that in mind, let's begin. I'm going to share my screen. And we can talk about supported decision-making. And the first thing we need to talk about when we talk about supported decision-making is something that we don't think about very often, and that's rights. We don't think about our rights very often. If you're a person without disabilities, you don't think about your rights very often because you just have them. We take them for granted. But for now, just for this exercise, I want you to think about your favorite rights, the ones that make you proudest, the ones that make you the most complete and proud version of yourself, the ones that make you American. Things like freedom of speech and freedom of elections and freedom of religion and the right to choose how we live our lives, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And now think about what those rights have in common. They all have choice in common. In fact, choice is what makes our rights real. Freedom of speech is the right to choose what to say and what not to say. Freedom of election is the right to choose who will govern us. Freedom of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is the right to choose how and where and with whom we live our lives. Freedom of religion, the right to choose how and where and even whether we worship. So choice makes rights real. There's a quote up on your screen from the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. And what he says is correct. I am my choices. We are, all of us, the sum total of the choices we have made throughout our lives. Good choices, bad choices, silly choices, significant choices. They add up to who we are. They make us the people that we are. So when you hear me talk about my favorite right is the right to make choices, because that's what makes all the other rights useful instead of just an example or a hope. So when you hear me talk about the right to make choices, I have a buzzword I want you to think about. It's called self-determination. I'm not a huge fan of buzzwords, but I do love this one because self-determination means making choices. When people are self-determined, they do things. They are the ones who make choices in their lives. They are the ones who direct their lives. They are the ones who do things instead of having things done to them. And here's something we know about self-determination. When people with disabilities are self-determined, when they make more choices, we know from 40 years of studies, they have better lives. And that's something I have to promise you today. The things I talk to you about are not hopes. They're not hippy-trippy vaporware. They are backed by decades of studies in science. So I can tell you without any doubt in my mind that we know that when people with disabilities make more choices, when they have more self-determination, their lives are better. They are healthier, more independent, better adjusted, better able to recognize and resist abuse. They are safer. They are more likely to work and live independently. So with that in mind, consider this question. Those rights you were thinking about before that make you who you are, that are so important to you, do they matter if you're not allowed to use them? Do they matter a thing? If I say to you, sure, you have the freedom of speech, but you're only going to speak when I tell you to speak, and you're only going to say what I tell you to say. Sure, you have the right to vote if I take you to the polls, and then you will vote for the candidate I tell you to vote for. Are those rights? Of course not, because without choice, our rights don't mean anything. But that's exactly what we have been doing to people with disabilities for about 1,500 years. See, I can tell you, I'm a bit of a legal geek. I know that in the Western world, the first time the laws were all put together in one place was about 1,500 years ago. In the Roman Empire, the Eastern world has the Western world beat by thousands of years with the Code of Hammurabi. But in the Western legal tradition, the first time the laws were all put together in one place, a Roman emperor named Justinian had all of the governors from all of the provinces bring their laws together and harmonize them so they could be put in a book. There would be one set of laws for the empire. It was called the Justinian Code. I have a copy. I am such a geek, I named one of my sons Justin. So I've read the Justinian Code. And I can tell you, it's the first time there were laws and rights in one place. And one of those laws said this: if you are feeble-minded, and that's how they described people with disabilities and older adults, you had to have a curator put over you, someone to make decisions for you and take over your life. And I've always said 1,500 years ago when that happened, it started a culture or an expectation that people with disabilities need people over them, that having difficulties doing things mean you shouldn't be allowed to do anything. And that culture has followed us. In the Middle Ages in Britain, where we got most of our laws, they updated Justinian. They said, if you are an idiot or a lunatic, and that was their word for people with disabilities, you had to have a committee over you to make decisions for you. Here in America, we just call that guardianship. Now, remember, there is nothing wrong with guardianship when it's right. And in fact, guardianship when it's right is a very good thing. And here's how guardianship works. Every law is different. We're going to look at Delaware's laws in a little bit. But here's what we know about guardianship. It works the same way essentially in every state. If a judge decides that I cannot make some or all decisions in my life, what that judge is supposed to do is take away the rights that I truly cannot use, and only those rights, and give them to someone else, say Ashley. In that case, Ashley becomes my guardian, and Ashley is empowered to do the things I truly cannot do and make the decisions I truly cannot make. And if guardianship worked that way, you'd have no bigger fan than me. The problem is what we know from studies is that the vast majority of guardianships take away all rights. More than 90% of guardianships are what we call full or plenary and take away all of the person's rights, whether or not the person can exercise them. And again, if that's what a person needs, great. But if a person can exercise their rights, taking them away is incredibly dangerous. And I've had judges tell me across the country, it's just easier to check all the boxes. So person after person after person who may not need a guardianship at all, or may only need a limited one, loses all of their rights. And in Delaware, that's particularly dangerous because what your law says is that when a person has a guardian, that guardian has all of the powers that a parent has over a minor child. Imagine being an adult. Imagine being a grown adult and being told that you have the same rights as a minor child and someone else is essentially your parent, and your parent who says where you live and whether you work and what kind of healthcare you get and what you do and who you're allowed to see. And that's why guardianship is neither a good thing or a bad thing, but it can be a dangerous thing, because when we have plenary guardianships that take away all rights, that reduce people to the status of a child, what happens is guardians have incredible power over people's lives in the most basic areas of people's lives, deciding how they make decisions about where they live and what they do, whether they work, whether they get healthcare, and what kind of lives they lead. And here's what we know, that just like having self-determination makes your life better, we know for almost 50 years of studies that losing your right to self-determination, losing your right to make choices can make your life worse. We knew as far back as the 70s that when people with disabilities lose their self-determination, they feel helpless, hopeless, and self-critical. They are less likely to do new things. They're more passive. They function less well. And on your screen right now is a quote from Congress. I always tell people that concerns about guardianship did not start with Free Britney. We have known about these concerns for decades. The quote up on your screen right now is from 1987. It is from the first congressional investigation of guardianship chaired by a congressman named Congressman Pepper from Florida. And they looked at guardianship laws. They talked to people under guardianship. They reviewed research. And what you're looking at is one of the first paragraphs of the report. Take a look at the bold words. The typical ward, person under guardianship, has fewer rights than the typical convicted felon. When someone has a guardian, particularly if they have what I call an overbroad or undue guardianship, a guardianship they don't need or that takes away more rights than they need to lose, what you get is a third party, another person, maybe a stranger, who can decide where they live, what they do, whether they get health care, sometimes when they die. It is, in the congressman's words, the most punitive civil penalty that can be put against an American citizen. And the rest of that sentence is except for the death penalty. So where do we go from here? Made you promise, I'm going to keep it. I promised you that I'm not going to say there should never be guardianship. And that is exactly how I feel. And frankly, how I think you should feel, because there's absolutely times when guardianship is helpful. If a person is so disabled that they cannot take part in the decision-making process, they should have a guardian. Ashley, I'll be with you in 1 second. If a person does not want to take part in the decision-making process and is putting their health or safety at risk, guardianship makes perfect sense. Or if a person is in an emergency and there's no one around to help, then of course guardianship makes perfect sense. So I'm not here to say there should never be guardianships. Ashley?
Thank you very much. And you may be getting to this information, but we do have one person wondering, what advice would you give to people with disabilities who have had guardianship placed on them against their will and who want to have their right to make their own decisions restored?
And I will be discussing that in some when we get into Delaware's laws. But the saddest and scariest thing is this. If someone went to court and the court put you in guardianship, the only way out is to go back through the court. So you would have to go to the court and show that you do not need that guardianship is no longer necessary or in your best interest, or as we're going to talk about supported decision-making, that even if you ever needed guardianship, now you do not because you have found another way. And the sad and scary part is you're still going to have to convince a judge of that. I always tell people the easiest way out of guardianship is not to get in the first place. But I strongly recommend you also talk to an attorney or maybe an organization like Disability Rights in Delaware, the Delaware Protection and Advocacy System. You can Google them and maybe they might be able to help you because it's a challenge. It is, I'm not going to lie, it's hard to get out. I've gotten people out across the country. In Delaware, it's probably easier because you have a law that allows for that. but you just have to fight. If you want your rights back, you have to go to court and fight for them. I wish I had a better, easier answer, but they put you in through the court. That's the only way out. And that's why I say guardianship can be a dangerous thing. It can take away people's rights. I'm not here to say there should never be guardianship, but I am here to say there should never be guardianship just because you have a disability, or just because you're X years old, or you need help, or the two at the bottom that always turn my stomach because that's the way it's always been, or for your own good. I do hear I have to get guardianship over my son or my daughter, my mother, my brother for their own good. And I always ask people to look in the mirror. Have you ever heard that phrase, relax, it's for your own good, and had something good happen? And the scary thing is, truly the scary thing, is people don't understand that there are other choices. The vast majority of guardians, I mean, of course, there are horrible stories of guardianship abuse, but in my experience, the vast majority of guardians, like 98%, absolutely mean well. They do think it is for their son or daughter or loved one's own good that that person lose their rights. And that's why I say we have to be careful. There is a quote up on your screen that's pushing 100 years old and is still correct. And it goes like this. When we mean the most well, we have to be the most careful, because when we act in what we think is for someone's own good, but don't understand the potential consequences, when we think that guardianship is the only option and don't understand the dangers that come with overbroad and undue guardianship, very bad things can happen. The greatest dangers to liberty lurk in the insidious encroachment by people who mean well, but don't understand the consequences. I will give you a great example. So many people have meant so well that the number of people under guardianship has tripled since 1995. And I want you to think about how shocking that is. Think about 1995. 1995 was only 5 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed. It was 4 years before the Supreme Court decided the Olmstead decision that essentially said that people with disabilities have the right to choose where and how they live. So in 1995, it was perfectly okay to say to a person with disabilities, you will live in an institution, you have no choice. In 1995, a sheltered workshop where people with disabilities work only amongst other people with disabilities and make less than minimum wage was not only legal, it was considered a preferred outcome. Organizations could brag about placing people in sheltered workshops. In 1995, we didn't have supports and services and Medicaid waivers and technology like we have today. Think about today. Think about what we have today. The right to live in the community is now protected by the Supreme Court. The right to work in an integrated setting and make real wages is an expectation. Someday I'm just going to be a right. We have programs like Medicaid waivers and vocational rehabilitation and so many others that provide people with opportunities to make choices and live their lives. And lastly, think about technology. Think about your phones, the phones that I hope you're not looking at right now. Think about what your phones do and realize that we spend so much more time on our phones than we do talking on them. We do things on our phones. Think about what our phones do. We can make medical appointments with our phones. We can have telemedicine appointments with our phones. We can invite someone to the telemedicine with us to help us understand the doctor and the doctor understand us. With my phone, I can balance my budget. I can check my bank account and I can give someone else access if I want to help me do that. With my phone, I can refill my prescriptions and have them delivered or authorize someone else to get them. A great story is I worked with a woman who has diabetes and suffered a traumatic brain injury. And she, because of her traumatic brain injury, didn't always take good care of her diabetes. Sometimes she went into a sugar crash or an insulin crash. And what she has now, because when that happens, she's exactly the type of person to be in an institution in 1995. But now she has a free app. A free app connects her phone to her glucose monitor. When her blood sugar gets too low, it sends her a text. Eat something. If it gets lower still, it texts her mother, her sister, and her doctor, so they can get in touch with her and help her. And just like that, for free, mind you, she is able to live and manage her healthcare independently. So what I'm saying is that here in 2023, we have more ways to make more people more independent than ever. And yet the number of people who've lost all their rights has tripled in just one generation. Why? Because we mean well, because people have meant well, but not considered the consequences. And the consequences are terrifying. We know from science that people who are in guardianship that they don't need, overbroad and undue guardianship, it can cause significant negative impacts on their life. They feel less well, they do less well, they live less long. On the other hand, we know that people with more self-determination, who make more decisions and do more things, have a better life. They're more likely to live independently and work independently and be part of their community. And here's what I think is a huge one, because the number one reason I hear for guardianship is safety. If I don't get guardianship, my son or my daughter or my mother, my loved one won't be safe. Well, I always talk to them about science, because I never question someone's motivation wanting to keep someone they love safe. Of course not. Of course, that's the first motivation we have for people we love. But I do talk about science. There's one of many, but this one particular study to me really says it all. A doctor named Dr. Kempka in New York worked with a group of women with intellectual disabilities. If you don't know this, you should. Women with intellectual disabilities are far more likely to be abused or neglected physically, emotionally, sexually than any other segment of the population. It's terrible. But what Dr. Kempka did was she worked with a group of women with intellectual disabilities. And I'm not a scientist. I call it an apples to apples study. What I mean is she worked with people who all had the same or similar abilities and limitations. And what she did was she divided them up, a classic study. She had a control group who she just told, go live your life. And she had an experimental group who she gave access to a new curriculum that was designed to improve their self-determination, improve their decision-making, and teach them the importance of self-determination and making decisions. When the curriculum was done, she brought the two groups back together and gave them a recognized test, a test that was designed to help people understand and test their ability to recognize abusive situations and avoid them. You know what she found? Remember, apples to apples. The ones with more self-determination, the ones that made more decisions, the ones that were empowered, they were better able to recognize abuse and avoid abuse. They were safer. So I tell that to judges and parents across the country. If you want to keep your child safe, want to keep someone safe, don't take their rights away. Build their abilities, because it's not rocket science. If you know it's your body, your life, and your choice, aren't you going to fight if someone tries to take it away? Ashley?
Thank you very much. So we have a new question. Are there any trends related to the increase in guardianship? And the example given, increase in prevalence of dementia in the aging population.
That's very interesting, because I get that a lot. Well, of course, the number of people in guardianship has tripled. We're getting older as a society. And you know what? I know that every morning when I get out of bed. But here's what the National Council on Disability found just in 2019. They found that the fastest growing segment going into guardianship are young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities from age 18 to 24. They found that if you are a young adult with IDD, you are more likely to be in guardianship than a 75-year-old. So the emerging trend, the trend that has been the highest growth one, was young adults. And we see, and this is something we'll cover in our second webinar, but the most common referral source for guardianship are schools. Schools telling parents, you have to get guardianship if you want to come to the IEP meeting, or pushing guardianship, well-meaning, by the way, thinking they're helping. But that is what we believe, what we call the school to guardianship pipeline is driving a lot of the increase. So what we know with self-determination comes more safety. Well, I can also tell you another study, geek that I am, my favorite study, called the National Core Indicator Study, really puts the cherry on the sundae. Because what the National Core Indicator Study looked at was the quality of life of people with disabilities in Delaware and across the country. And what it wanted to look at was how certain things impacted people's quality of life. And this was, once again, an apples to apples study. What they did was they compared people of similar abilities and limitations. They used the old phrases mild, moderate, and severe, so that they compared people with mild disabilities to people with mild disabilities, moderate to moderate, severe, severe. And one of the things they looked at, just one, was the impact of having a guardian on quality of life. And here's what they found in Delaware and across the country. Apples to apples, mind you. People with disabilities who did not have guardians were more likely to work, live independently, have friends, be part of their community, date, socialize, get married, be respected, and practice the religion of their choice than people with similar abilities and limitations who did have guardians. So I always say, aren't the things you see on your screen the exact things every parent wants for their child? We all want our children to work and live and be happy and have friends. Well, if what we know is that the one thing that may well be standing in between having that and not having that is having a guardian. Doesn't it mean not that guardianship is bad or always wrong, but doesn't it mean we have to think about it? That we should not reflexively say guardianship is our only choice, or you're turning 18, we have to get a guardian. So if we can go from there, if we can say that 1,500 years of culture and expectation that the only choice is guardianship should change, then we can move forward. Because that's where I want to talk about where we go from here. Because if we know that some people need more help, and if we know that self-determination is the key to a quality of life, and if we know that losing self-determination can hurt quality of life, then what we need to do, in my opinion, and I hope in yours, is find ways to, one, maximize people's self-determination, because that is the key to a better quality of life. And two, make sure that people have the help they need to exercise their self-determination effectively and safely. And if we could agree to that, I have a story for you. This person on your screen, her name's Jenny Hatch. I met Jenny 10 years ago. Time flies. When I met Jenny, this is what I knew about her. She was 29 years old. She graduated high school. She'd had her own job, not a special job, not a supported job, a regular job, making regular pay, paying regular taxes for 5 years. She had her own apartment, not a group home, not a supported home, her own apartment with a roommate that by all accounts was kept spotlessly. Jenny had friends she hung out with and liked to. She was politically active. People knew her in the local Republican Party. She had a church she went to. She had hobbies that she did. Jenny had a life like many of you have, where what she wanted to do, go to work, see her friends, have her life, go to her home, live her life. And she had that till one day she was riding her bike and got hit by a car. And Jenny had to go to the hospital and had to have surgery. And when Jenny was coming out of the hospital, she found herself on the receiving end of a petition for guardian. Well, shortly after she got out of the hospital, she found herself on the receiving end of a petition to put her into guardianship. Her mother and her stepfather asked to become her guardians. And one day in August of 2012, before I ever met Jenny, Jenny walked into a tiny courtroom in Newport News, Virginia. And she walked in with all her rights, every right that you have. She could choose where to go, what to do, and where to live. And in just 3 hours, she lost it all. Because when I met her in February of 2013, this is what she was facing. Jenny was under a court order putting her in a quote unquote temporary guardianship with no end date in sight. Instead of living where she wanted to live, which was with her friends, she was required by her guardian to live in a group home, a nice group home that was behind barbed wire and segregated from the rest of the community. Instead of going back to her job where she was welcome to return and wanted to return to, she was required by her guardian to work in the sheltered workshop attached to her group home, where she worked, in her words, snapping snaps together, being bored. And I saw her records. She worked more or less full time for 8 months and made less than $1,000 total. Her guardians controlled all access to her. And by all, I mean all. Her cell phone was taken away. Her laptop was taken away. Her Facebook password was changed. If you wanted to see or speak with Jenny, you had to fill out a permission slip and submit it to the guardians and ask for permission to see her. And this is when people tend to say, you must be exaggerating. So I put it online. You can go to jennyhatchjusticeproject.org right now and see it. There's a section that says Jenny Hatch. You can see the Justice for Jenny trial. You can see the permission slip. And what you'll see is it says, if you want to visit with Jenny or talk with Jenny, you must agree to the rules of guardianship, which was on the back of the form. Rule number 1, you are not allowed to talk to her about her guardianship because her guardianship upset her. Do you know why it upset her? She did not want to be in guardianship. She wanted to go back to her job and was told, get used to your new life. You work here. She wanted to go back to her friend's home, was told, get used to your new life. You live here. She wanted to go back to her church and was told, get used to your new life. We go to this church. So by the time I finally met Jenny, I guess technically I broke and entered. Pro tip, if you carry a briefcase, talk fast, and have kind of a New York accent, you can get in anywhere. So I walked in. I want to talk to Jenny. They said, okay. And I talked to Jenny. And I said, I've heard of you. You know, people in Jenny's life asked me to come visit her. And I said, I'd like to be a lawyer. Can I represent you? And Jenny said, yes. And I became lucky enough to represent Jenny Hatch. And one of the first things I did was call the lawyer for the guardians. And I said, look, I know you think she needs a guardian. We think she doesn't. That's why we go to court. But one question, the whole permission slip thing doesn't apply to me, does it? And the lawyer said, yeah, it does. And I asked again, are you saying I'm not allowed to talk to my client about her case? And I was told those are the rules. Now imagine for a second really what that means. And imagine this. Think of Jenny Hatch instead of this person. Think about her as an axe murderer, found with an axe in a head and covered in person and saying, I did it. She'd have the right to talk to a lawyer about her case. But Jenny wasn't lucky enough to be an axe murderer because she had less rights than an axe murderer, apparently, and not allowed to talk to her lawyer. So the first thing I had to do as Jenny's lawyer was just ask the court to give us permission to talk to her. And let me tell you, it required a motion, an argument. You can, JennyHatchJusticeProject.org. You can see it. You can see the permission slip. You can see the emails between me and her attorney. And thank goodness, when we went to court, the court said, yes, you do have the right to talk to her about her case. Because I was thinking the same thing you are. Why did she need a guardian? That accident hurt her back, not her brain. It had no impact on her cognitive ability. So why did she suddenly need a guardian now after 29 years? And the first thing I saw in her file was the order putting her in guardianship. And it was long, and it was the kind of thing you pull off, a form. But I wanted to see one section of it. This is the section that said what the guardians have the power to do. They have the power to decide who Jenny sees, what kind of support she gets, what kind of healthcare she gets, what kind of safety and habilitation, day services, what kind of education, what kind of treatment she gets, and where she lives. Look at those words. Did Jenny have any rights left? I mean, strictly speaking, was she even an American anymore with no rights that every American citizen has? How can that happen? So I kept reading. Remember that 3-hour hearing I told you about where she lost her rights? It turned out that the star witness at that hearing was a psychologist who went in to give what's called a capacity evaluation, reviewed Jenny at a time when Jenny was on Percocet. And this is what she testified to. When she was asked if Jenny could make decisions about living, she was told if she had assistance, she might be able to do that. But what about her legal skills? She would need assistance to understand a legal document. What about managing a bank account? She needs assistance with a bank account. When she was asked what Jenny's going to need in her life, she was told she's going to need assistance to make decisions about her health care. She will need someone to guide her and give her assistance. When asked what would be best for Jenny, she said, I believe what would be best for Jenny would be to be surrounded and supported by people who know her and love her, who give her the assistance she needs. So I kept reading. Turned out Jenny's parents had had her sign a power of attorney when she turned 18, 11 years before. And we asked, if you think Jenny can't understand legal documents, you think she can't make decisions, how did she sign a power of attorney? And we were kind of expecting that they would say, well, she can't. We hoped she could. Now we know better. But that's not what they said. Their exact words are on your screen. They said that Jenny understood the power of attorney because the lawyer explained it to her. The lawyer went through it with her page by page and word by word and line by line and got to know Jenny, and they had several visits and they worked together. And looking at the bottom, based on a series of observations over several visits, the attorney concluded and we concurred that Jenny was capable of understanding the power of attorney. At trial, they went even farther and said their family doctor said because they explained it to Jenny, she could understand the power of attorney. So here's the thing. Here's what I know about Jenny. I talked to her multiple times a week, most recently about 3 days ago. And I've known this about Jenny since the first time I met her. She absolutely needs help. She absolutely needs assistance to understand legal issues, to understand her medical care, to understand how to manage her money. She needs assistance every day with her life. Do you know what that makes her? It makes her human. Every one of us, each and every one on this webinar, outside of this webinar, in this world needs help with something. We are all Jenny Hatch. It is no sin to need assistance. It is no sin to need guidance, unless you're a person with a disability who for 1,500 years, there has been a culture that assumes if you need help doing something, you can't do anything. So we had to show to the judge that there was no sin in needing help. And we talked to the judge about supported decision-making. I know 31 slides in, I'm finally getting to the point. But what we had to show the judge was that Jenny did make her own decisions. She just needed help to do it. So what is supported decision-making? Well, good news. There's a definition on your screen. There is a definition that you will find in textbooks, that you will find in articles, that supported decision-making is an alternative to guardianships through which people with disabilities use friends, family members, and professionals to help them understand the situations and choices they face so they may make their own decisions without the need for a guardian. It's a wonderful decision. Definition. I wrote it. I also hate it. I wish that you would ignore it. Because if you really want to know what supported decision-making is, ask yourself how you make decisions. Ask yourself what you do when you don't know what you don't know. When you have to make a decision about something you're not familiar with. What do you do when the doctor speaks medical jargon at you? Like me, you probably say, would you please explain that in plain language? What do you do when the auto mechanic talks jargon at you? You probably do some research. You call a friend. What do you do when you're faced with a work issue you've never faced before? You talk to a coworker. Well, getting that help is supported decision-making. That's all supported decision-making is. It's getting the help you need to do the things you need to do in the ways you need to do them with the people you need to do them with so you can understand and make your own decisions. It's what we do every single day. I mean, think about all the cliches about decision-making we all use all the time. Don't make a snap judgment. Don't go off half-cocked. Make an informed decision. Get a second opinion. My dad's favorite saying, if you measure twice, you only have to cut once. They all mean the same things. Get help. Find another opinion. Find someone that can help you and give you guidance, just like Jenny needed. That is what supported decision-making is. And that is what Jenny had done her whole life. She didn't call it supported decision-making because who calls it supported decision-making? I don't, you don't, we just call it life. So how did Jenny sign the power of attorney? The attorney explained it. She understood it. She signed it. How did Jenny consent to surgery if she can't make decisions? Well, her father and stepfather both told the same story, how Jenny's needle phobic and Jenny didn't want to consent to surgery. And the doctor was great. The doctor explained everything and said, Jenny, it's going to be one needle. And when you wake up, it'll be gone. You'll be able to walk better. And you know what? Jenny understood it, signed it, and agreed to it. How did Jenny apply for Medicaid? You ever apply for Medicaid? Forms this high? They were explained to her page by page and line by line. Jenny, when explained, understood it and signed it. Person after person, from case managers to friends to family members, said that when Jenny has things explained to her, she understands it and she can make decisions about it. So we finally get down after 6 days of trial to closing argument. I'm sure you'll not be surprised to know it's my favorite part of every trial. And I got to pound the table and pound the facts and make a big speech like Al Pacino about why she didn't need a guardian. And that's when the judge said, I'll be back in 15 minutes with my order. And he was gone for an hour. And that gave me time to tell Jenny that we were going to lose. Because I thought we were going to lose, because that judge in the first hearing, the 3-hour hearing, talked about Jenny needing protection. And that judge was very hard on our position about Jenny being able to make decisions. But the judge came back on the bench and started reading. And he said, you can see the order. It's on Jenny Hatch Justice Project. And if you do, you'll see that the first several pages are all justifying why she needs a guardian. So we thought we lost, but we expected to lose. We expected to win this case in the Court of Appeals. And the judge was reading about, Jenny needing something. And then the judge said, however, on top page 5. And however is a magic word in the law because you never want to get stuck on the wrong side of however. That judge said essentially, however, Jenny, you have not proven to me that you don't need a guardian for everything. So he said, we're going to keep you in guardianship for 2 things, health reasons, health decisions, and safety decisions. Everything else, you have your rights back. You can make your choices. It was a start. Then the judge said, the guardians are not going to be your parents. See, I did not tell you about Jenny's employers, Jim and Kelly. Jenny had worked for Jim Talbert and Kelly Morris for 5 years. And when Jenny was coming out of the hospital and needed some rehabilitative care, her parents wouldn't take her in. I have no problem saying it. It's in the court record. You know who took her in? Jim and Kelly. Her employers took her in and they became a family. And that's where Jenny wanted to live. She said, I want to live with Jim and Kelly. And Jim and Kelly, before I ever heard the name Jenny Hatch, had hired their own lawyer to make an argument that went like this. Jenny does not need a guardian. But if she has to have one, let it be us, because we'll support her. So the judge said, Mr. Talbot and Miss Morris, you are Jenny's guardians now, the people that Jenny wants better. And then the judge said that guardianship expires in 1 year. And it did. That guardianship ended in August of 2014. And in August of this year, she will have been free from guardianship and making her own decisions for 9 years. And you know what? She's doing just fine. Then the judge said, something that no judge had ever said before, said the job of a guardian, whether in Virginia, Delaware, or anywhere else, the guardian's job is not to make decisions instead of the person. It's not to take the place of the person. It's to work with the person. It is to help the person make the decisions they want to make using supported decision-making. Then the judge said two more things that I admittedly missed because I was sobbing into Jenny's shoulder. He said to Jim and Kelly, get her out of that group home today and get her back to work on Monday. And a year after she lost her rights, Jenny went home. And that's her with me leaving the courthouse that day. It's one of my favorite pictures because look at Jenny's face. She had been told to give up. She had been told to get used to her new life, and she wouldn't. And because of it, she got to go home. That's why they call it the Justice for Jenny trial. She got the justice she fought for. And that's a wonderful story, isn't it? But if it's just a story, I wasted your time. Because you have to do better than say it's a wonderful story, or Jenny made a miracle, or Jenny won her rights, or Jenny fought. Those things may be true, but they're not helping anyone else. You have to go beyond that. You have to ask why. Why did Jenny get justice when so many others haven't? Remember, 1 million more people in guardianship today than in 1995. So why Jenny? And by the way, lots and lots of people in guardianship are quote unquote higher functioning than Jenny Hatch, much as I hate that phrase. So you have to ask why Jenny. And you can't say it's because she's an angel or a miracle worker or anything like that. That's not the reason. If it was just Jenny being the smart, strong, determined person she was, she'd be back in guardianship, back in the sheltered workshop, snapping snaps together. The reason that Jenny is not in guardianship is she had help. She had support from friends. Jim and Kelly spent, I think, something like $50,000 on their own lawyer. Who does that? She had people from across the country supporting her. The guy who is now my boss flew down from Syracuse, New York to Newport News, Virginia to testify for almost no money to support this person. We had national organizations submitting briefs and arguing for her because they said, this is the person that can be the one that is the first to get the right to use supported decision-making. The media loved her. Can you imagine why? Look at that face. And she had a judge who was willing to listen and learn. A judge who went from protection to rights, who became the first judge at a trial level to use the word supported decision-making and free Jenny. But do you know what that means? It means she got lucky. That's the real lesson of Jenny's case, you know. That's what you have to take out of that 20-minute story. Jenny got lucky, and you have to understand that your rights should never depend upon being lucky. It shouldn't depend upon having a Jim and Kelly in your corner. It shouldn't depend upon being telegenic. It shouldn't depend upon having a far-reaching judge. It should just be your rights. We should start with rights. So how can we get there? This is your law on the screen. This law says when someone in Delaware can go into guardianship, and I want you to look at the bold words. You can only have a guardian in Delaware if you are unable to manage your care for yourself. Take care of yourself, take care of your property. If you are able to take care of yourself or your property, you should not have a guardian. It is only if you are unable that you should. Well, what does unable mean? Think about it. Think about it. Is being able or unable a yes or no question? If you think it is, think again, because there are things that you're able to do right now that you may not be able to do tomorrow because you're sick, or there may be things that you've never done before that you're not able to do without help. There may be times in your life when you are stressed out and you think, I should not make decisions today. I should avoid making big decisions. On those days, you are unable. And sometimes people need extreme amounts of help to manage their lives and manage their property. Anyone who's ever had an accountant needs help to manage their property. Anybody who's ever used TurboTax needs help to manage their money. So here's my thing. Being able or unable is not a yes/no question. It is dependent upon the help you have. Want an example? Unless you have a medical license, you are unable to take care of your health because you can't prescribe medication, you can't diagnose yourself. But you know what you have? You have a doctor you go to. You have a doctor who can say, take this pill or do this thing or rest in bed. And by trusting that doctor and listening to that doctor, you are able to take care of your health because someone gave you help. So your ability to manage yourself and your life is directly dependent on the help you have. So before you ever, I strongly urge, before you ever recommend guardianship, there's two questions you got to ask. And the first one goes like this. If you can only be able to take care of yourself or your property if you get help, are you unable? Of course not. Because if needing help to do things meant you were unable as a matter of law, we'd all need guardians because we all need help with something, sometime. Next question. Most important question there is. Before you seek a guardianship, before you recommend a guardianship, if you're a judge, before you order a guardianship, you got to ask this question. What else have you tried? Because 98% of the time, yes, a person in a coma absolutely needs a guardian, but 98% of the time, how can you know if someone is unable unless something has been tried to help them be able? And that's not just my position. That's the position of the National Guardianship Association, or the NGA. The National Guardianship Association is made up of guardians, by guardians, and for guardians. The website is guardianship.org. They have a code of ethics for guardians. They train guardians. They certify guardians. There is nobody more invested in guardianship than the NGA. And this is what they say. Before guardianship, try something else. Try supported decision-making. It might work. It might not. If it doesn't work, guardianship is probably just fine. But what's the rush? Given the rights at stake, given the things that's so important to you that you would fight if someone tried to take them away from you, why are we rushing to take them away from people in our lives? Because supported decision-making can help people with disabilities the exact same way it helps you. Think about how supported decision-making helps you. It can help you figure out what your options are, weigh your options, make a pro and con list, figure out that you're not making a snap judgment, that you're making an informed choice, and that before you make that choice, you have fully considered all your options. The same way that we get help every day. People with disabilities might need more help. They might not. They might need different types of help. They might not. But the principle remains the same. With assistance, empowering people, we can have greater impacts. There can be informed decision-making if there is a supporter that can help inform you. And here's another piece of good news that you already know. There's no one way to do supported decision-making. If you're wondering, get to the point, Jonathan. What's the book? What's the app? What's step one? What's step two? You know, I'm speaking as a person who's written not one, but two books on supported decision-making. There is no one way. And if anyone ever tells you there's only one way to use supported decision-making, run away and run away fast, because you know that's not true. Because you know that you make decisions for yourself differently than I make decisions for myself. You need different help than I do at different times in different ways. And everyone is like that. Some of us just need informal support, you know, an ear to listen, a shoulder to lean on. I can bounce ideas off you. I myself, like many others, have what I call go-to people. People I go to for specific things. My sister is an educational professional. If one of my sons is having difficulty in school, which seems like days that end in Y, I call her. When I have questions about cars, I have a buddy who knows about cars. I have another buddy who knows about money. I go to them when I need help. And that's the kind of things you can put in, as we're going to see, a supported decision-making plan or a power of attorney. Some people like to be very formal. And in Delaware, this was piloted with micro boards or circles of support. Think about it as like a personal board of directors or a personal IEP team in the educational context, where I've got my supporters all together on Zoom or live, and we just meet and we talk about my life. And we bounce around issues, and maybe we debate some. The whole idea being I get the information I need so I can understand and make the decisions I need to make. All of these are examples of supported decision-making, because all of them involve me going to you to get the information, the advice, and the support I need so I can understand the decisions I have to make and make those decisions. In fact, if you really want to break it down, you only need three things to have supported decision-making. You need three commitments. I call them the three commandments. And if you can agree to these, then we can all be advocates for supported decision-making. And they're all easy. Number one, we agree that everyone has the right to make choices to the maximum of their ability. And that's easy. That's the Declaration of Independence, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we are all created equal and we all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's number one. Number two, even easier. I can say to Ashley, can you help me out with this issue? Can you help me exercise this right? Can you answer this question? Without Ashley then saying, whoop, that must prove she can't do it. And if you can't do it, you need a guardian. And that's easy because we all ask for advice every day. We all get help every day from our friends, from our family members, from our coworkers. And the last one's the easiest of them all. We realize there's as many ways to give and get help as there are people. There's always another tool in the box. First thing you try might not work. Haven't you ever gone to plan B? You might have to go to plan D or plan Q or plan triple B. But we keep trying because something might work. And if nothing works, guardianship is fine. But what's the rush? Because what we're showing, the reason why supported decision-making is so important is the research supports it. We know that people who use supported decision-making to make their own decisions have more self-determination than people under guardianship. That's not rocket science. If I'm making my own decisions with support, I have more control over my life than if someone else is making decisions for me. And what do we know about self-determination? It's the key to quality of life for people with disabilities. In fact, we did a study on this a couple of years ago. In Virginia, we worked with 10 young adults with disabilities across the spectrum of abilities. Some were verbal, some were not. Some were in guardianship, some were not. All of them had intellectual and developmental disabilities. And what we did was we worked with them to use supported decision-making. We taught them about it, but we didn't tell them what to do. We told them and their supporters, go make a plan. Tell us what your plan is. And once they developed a plan, we said, go live your plan. And over the course of about a year, we collected data from them. And here's what we found. Across the board, all 10 were more independent, more confident, and according to everyone, were better at making decisions. According to their supporters, they made objectively better decisions. And even in the middle of a pandemic, they had a better quality of life. Why? Because they were self-determined. They were empowered to make their own decisions, to use support, to do more things. And we learn and we know that self-determination leads to a better life. So one of the things about Delaware that's great is you guys have a law that recognizes supported decision-making, that empowers people to enter into legally enforceable supported decision-making agreement. There's a section of your law, Title 16, Section 9405, which is entitled supported decision-making. And what it essentially says is this: people with disabilities, adults, can create supported decision-making agreements. You can do it voluntarily, and you can say, I have one supporter or more. You can identify the types of decisions that that supporter can do and those that they can't do. The idea being, I, Jonathan, nominate Ashley and Alicia and someone else to be my supporters. And I'm going to give you the power to help me make healthcare decisions. And I'm going to give you the power to see my healthcare records if I want, but I'm not giving you the power to help me with financial decisions. And I don't want you seeing my financial records. Or we can pick any other rights that are important. The key is that for the supported decision-making agreement, the person says, these are my supporters. These are what I want them to do. And these are things I don't want them to do. And a form has been created. There's a link on your screen. You can see Delaware's model supported decision-making agreement, where it lays out these things. It gives you the chance to say, these people are my supporters. These are the things I want them to do. These are things that I don't want them to do. And here's a place I can sign it and make it enforceable. And the thing about supporters, your law is very clear on the things they can do. Your law comes out and says they can help people get medical records. They can help people make appointments. They can help people monitor and follow through on their affairs and listen to what they want to do and help them accomplish it. But the things they can't do are tell them what to do or influence them on what to do or do things they're not given permission to do. So your law is clear. Supporters support, and how they support and who they are and what they do goes in the supported decision-making agreement. And it gives you an opportunity to create a plan. And you can have people who are supporters, whoever you want. There are some people who are not allowed, like people who work for you. People who you work for are not supposed to be your supporters unless you have a separate way to get them there. But the law is looking to avoid conflicts of interest. So you don't want someone who owes you money or who you owe money to in a position to influence you about how you spend money. Kind of common sense. And as we move forward, this is a very quick summary of your law, but what I want you to remember about your law is it says you can decide who your supporters are and what they do. And when you do that, what we're doing is putting the person in control of their life, helping the person be more self-determined. Because the last question I always get is this safe? Will the person be safe? Was there any chance the person will be taken advantage of? And I have to tell you, the answer is yes. People get taken advantage of all the time. People with and without disabilities get taken advantage of by people they trust. But that's not the standard, by the way, because we all make mistakes. We shouldn't say you only have the right to make decisions if you only make good ones, because if that's the standard, none of us should ever drink beer. Instead, I want you to think about it this way. There are terrible stories out there of guardianship abuse, which doesn't mean that guardians are bad or guardianship are bad. It means that some people are bad. So I always say this: if we have to think about what to try, guardianship or supported decision-making, what we know from Dr. Kempke's study is that self-determination is linked with safety. And if I'm given the choice what to try first, I'm at least going to try the one that's linked with self-determination, because that is the key to a life. It is the key to safety. It is the key to independence. I'm going to try supported decision-making first, because if it doesn't work, guardianship's always there. And as the unfortunate answer I gave to the person earlier, if we start at guardianship, it can be awfully hard to get out. Ashley?
Sorry, it took me a minute to find unmute. I just wanted to pop on. I see that we have a couple other questions if we have a few moments before we end today. So I'll give you any additional time that you need to finish up your presentation, and then I would love to pose the additional questions we have. I'm
absolutely happy to stay as long until every question is answered. But if we focus on people's rights, if we focus and start by recognizing and respecting people's rights, then great things happen. If we empower people to exercise their rights, if we encourage people to be self-determined, then great things can happen. We can empower people to have rights, and we can empower people to make their own choices. And to me, that's the most important thing. Because if our goal is helping people have the best lives they can, then what the science says, what I think morality says, is empowering people to have self-determination, to encouraging people to respect and protect their rights. That's what changes the world, one person at a time. You know, since Jenny Hatch's case 10 years ago, 23 states, Delaware is one of them, have changed their laws. Almost half the country in just 10 years have said, this is something that we should try. This is something that we can believe in. This is something that can empower people. And the last thing I want to say is this. Think about yourselves, not just the people in your life, but think about yourselves. Because if you are not lucky enough to die suddenly, and I'm not even making a joke, if you're not lucky enough to die suddenly, someday you're going to be old. Someday you are going to be the one in the system. You'll be infirmed or disabled or considered, not able to take care of yourself. What kind of system do you want? Do you want a system that respects you, that empowers you, that wants you to make your own decisions, that wants you to control your life? Or do you want a system that says you have a limitation doing something, therefore you should not be allowed to do anything? 1,500 years of that culture is enough. Guardianship can be appropriate when it's needed, but it shouldn't be the first thing we try, except in an emergency. Supported decision-making can empower people to make their own decisions and live their best lives. And the next two webinars we do are going to be all about how we can use supported decision-making to make people's lives better. It's been absolutely my honor to talk with you today. My email is on your screen. You can always email me questions, and I'm happy to answer any now.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing your time with us today and for presenting such an informative presentation. We really appreciate your time. A couple quick housekeeping things while I have everyone here. The link for the supported decision-making session evaluation is in the chat. Please take a few brief moments to complete that, as it will help us to inform future sessions, and we really appreciate your time in advance for doing that. Also, we have session 2 of our SDM, Supported Decision-Making Speaking Series, coming up next Tuesday, the same time and place. So that'll be Tuesday, May 2nd from noon to 1 o'clock. The link to register for that session is also in the chat. If you register for all 3 sessions the first go around, then you are all set and you can use that same link to join on. And again, the link for the supported decision-making Padlet with all of our related resources is in the chat as well. And I see that Jonathan added his email address. So thank you so much for providing that for us. And I do have one question here that I think is good to pose for the group. And it says, so Delaware has positive supported decision-making laws, but what about other states? Are there better states versus others in terms of the law?
The states differ. There are, like I said, 23 states in Washington, D.C. have laws. My opinion is this, and this is not a cop-out. Any law that empowers people to use supported decision-making is a good one, because previously there wasn't a law on that. Now, I have been in many states where they do not have SDM laws, and I have argued that their laws cover SDM. But mentioning it in a law, saying this is a good thing to do, makes it an available and a real resource. I don't know that laws are necessary for people to use supported decision making, but I do know that when laws empower people to do it, there's a better chance that they will. So my view is, my personal view is laws that give people the most options in how to use supported decision making are going to be the best ones. But any law that empowers people is a very good thing.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. We are looking forward to hosting our second session on Tuesday, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much. See you next week. Bye-bye.